Okay, so I understand you've been hearing a lot of education since morning. Since I'm a lawyer, I'll be speaking on a legal and technical aspects of education, which is more related to how to grow the university or an educational institution with strategic investments. So let me start with a story. Now, this is a story of, let's say, one fictitious person, Mr. Dam, who is an industrialist who wants to go into education, and he does not know anything how to get into and venture into education. He has a vision. The issue is that the education institution cannot be set up just with vision. It requires a huge amount of funding and huge amount of investments. Considering that he wants to run it as a corporate enterprise, he's grappling with a lot of questions. And some of the questions would be, can I set up a for profit educational institution? Can I draw dividends? Can I have a situation where I invite foreign investment into the education institution? Can I have related party transactions here? Can I outsource services from the education institution? And can I have private equity and venture capital investments into the higher education institution? So he's grappling with all of these issues. He goes to a legal expert like us, and I'm going to be just narrating the interview. I'm just doing a question and answer interview session here, what Mr. Ram discusses with the legal expert. So the first of the question that he would have is that can I set up a for-profit educational institution? Now, the answer to that is, since education is a social service in India, it's still wrapped in that particular philosophy. We cannot have an education institution which is for profit, which means the educational institution has to be run from entities which are not for profit, cannot declare any dividends whatsoever. So, what are these entities? These entities could be, for example, a society registered under the Society Registration Act, could be a trust, could be a Section 8 company registered on Companies Act. And if a question is whether a trust would be better or a society would be better, if you're looking at a closely held entity, then trust is definitely better, because trust can be established by just two people, and in fact can be established by one person as well. Whereas a society would need at least 7 to 8 people to be a national society. The second question would be whether a trust versus company would be a better structure. Now, if you're looking at private investments, if you're looking at PE investments into your education institution, then you need to go for a company, because company is a structure which is more understandable to a private equity fund or a foreign investor, but there are far more compliances compared to a trust. The second question he would have, now I can't have foreign investment in these not-for-profit entities. How do I fund the university? How do I fund this establishment of a higher education institution? It could be just a college. The answer would be that you need to set up outsourcing entities. What are these entities? For example, if you need to set up an infrastructure, you will set up an infrastructure-enabled company, which is a for-profit company. And in this company, you can have foreign investments. Similarly, if you want to manage and run the institution, you can outsource a lot of services. So you need to have a management services company or an educational company where foreign investment can come in. So that's one of the aspects that you have. These are some of the structures that are adopted by the industry to establish their educational institutions. The second question would be, I have got the private equity or I have got the foreign investment in these outsourced entities, but my educational institution is still unfunded. How do I run the educational institution? What would be the mechanism for that? And most important, can I outsource services from these educational institutions to these entities which are actually got funded? The answer is yes. There are no regulations, whether it is UGC or AICT or any other higher education regulation, which bars or which sort of restricts the outsourcing of services from the higher education institution to these support companies. So you can outsource services such as, let's say, development of high-end content, could be library management, could be laboratory management, could be horticulture, could be housekeeping, could be hostel services, could be several other services that can be outsourced. Similarly, all the infrastructure services which are being developed can be outsourced to these companies. The issue would be, the outsourced entities are all related entities. They're all related and connected to the main promoter. Is that possible? Is that even allowed under law? So there we'll have to look at the regulations, not from only from UGC requirement, but also from income tax point of view, and see that income tax laws do not bar related party relationships. That's clear. And the reason it doesn't bar is that there is no harm in providing services or receiving services, even from related party entities, as long as they are commenced, the services fees are reasonable, they are justifiable, and they are commensurate to the services provided, which basically means that no undue benefit has to be given to the related party entity for providing those services. What it basically bottom line means is that it has to be an arm's length, which basically means that as a promoter, you need to do several activities to ensure that your services fee for these outsourced activities are not unjustified or unreasonable. How do you do that? First of all, do a transfer pricing study for sure. Also receive quotations and bids from several entities which are not related party and benchmark them. Once you benchmark your services, you'll be able to justify that this particular service was costing, let's say, X. The related party is charging X minus, and that entity is equally having the caliber and the expertise to deliver those services. And you have to do it regularly. You have to do it every year to justify. And the income tax audit or the income tax officers are not going to come to you after 2 years or 3 years. They'll come after you after 5 years when you're well entrenched with the outsourcing entity. So you have to do it yearly or twice, once in 2 years. Also, when you draw up your contracts with the related party, ensure those contracts are so drawn up that it passes the muster and the audit of the income tax authorities. Why do I say that? And I have recently handled such cases where such notices were received that these are related party transactions. How come only this related party, which is connected to the owner, is providing the services? Now, your contract should be so well defined, which means the roles and responsibility of the related service provider, the mapping of his performance, the performance matrix is clearly mapped out. There are rectification and breach clauses in the contract. You also should ask for liquidated damages even from a related party. What the biggest mistake what the related party transaction has is those contracts are 1 pages or 2 pager, and they will never pass the muster. If they go to an income tax officer, he knows that this has been done just to cover up flow of funds which are surplus with the higher education institution. So be clear in mapping up the roles and responsibility, doing the annual audit, ensuring that these are properly delivered services. These are not services which have been just shammed up. Do not go that way, because you will be in deep trouble doing that. Now, the next issue would be, sorry, I think I skipped one of the slides. Anyway, so one of the issue would be, can I, as an outsourcing entity or as an entity which is running higher education, can I receive private equity funding? Because private equity funding and education are two different ball games. Foreign investment is a different story, because foreign investment could come from educational companies. It can come from strategic companies. But can I get pure private equity funds who have nothing to do with, let's say, education as a sector? Can I receive funding from them? As again, the outsourcing entities are absolutely welcome to receive private equity funds. The question would be, in an owner's mind and also in the private equity fund mind, that when I'm investing in the outsourcing entity, which is providing the services to the higher education entity, how do I get a share of the pie of the higher education entity? What is the basis in which I'll be able to control the higher education institution itself? And there were lots of ways and means to do that. For example, typically a private equity fund or a strategic investor would have a nominee as a board member of the higher education institution. They will also have affirmative voting rights on what can be done and cannot be done as a higher education institution. For example, you're passing a new budget. The budget would require the affirmative consent of the board member, who is a nominee of the private equity fund. So there are lots of ways and means to do that. What are the other ways of strategic collaboration in the education sector other than outsourcing entities, private equity funds, FDI? Well, you do not need to just follow these structures. There is one more structure, which is simply having management services arrangement. Now, management services arrangement would typically mean that you are an expert in managing educational institutions, and you bring in your experts and you pitch it to the higher education that I will manage your institution and I'll go through the entire operations and management. But be very clear, do not call that arrangement as a management services, because the core activities of the educational institution, which is academic and day-to-day running and operation, has to be managed by the educational institution. Otherwise, it will be flagged off. So what you need to be clear is how you draft and how you structure your management services agreement. One more way, which is not related to the previous discussion, is you can have collaborations in the form of strategic collaboration, where you want to keep as an educational institution your structure as capital light, which basically means that you will collaborate with either infrastructure provider who does all the infrastructure heavy lifting of setting up the infrastructure, other than the mandatory one which a higher education needs to bring in within its society or trust because of the AICTE and the UGC norm. But the rest of the infrastructure is developed by the infrastructure provider. Or you can have a strategic alliance and collaboration for a content developer who does the entire pedagogy and content and development of knowledge-based information. Again, as I said before, the education has to be provided by the university, has to be the professors, the associate professors, everybody, the educationist has to be delivering the courses. You cannot have outsourced professors from outside. You cannot outsource training, teachers coming from outside and delivering, let's say, a BTech course. That's a total no-no. But content and pedagogy and specialized training and knowledge and solutions can be you can have a collaboration where there are a lot of dimensions to creating structures in higher education. I just have 15 minutes and I'll leave 1 or 2 minutes for questions. Well, I'll be here for the lunch, so I'll be happy to answer your question. Thank you.